This is Audiovisual Cultures, the podcast which examines sound and image-based cultural production. I'm the creator and host, Paula Blair. In this edition, Andrew, Shail and I spend a day at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe and speak to one quarter of Just These Plays, Will Sebag-Montefiore, about the comedy troupe's show. Andrew and I also talk about seeing Shhh, an improvised silent movie, and the play Antigone. We begin though with some thoughts on our previous Fringe experiences.
So Dr. Blair, why is it that we are speaking over quite a hubbub in the background?
We are in a very busy, very autumnal Edinburgh during the Fringe.
We don't really call it the festival anymore, do we? We just refer to this thing that inhabits the fringes, I suppose, of the festival, but which has basically taken over from the festival and is therefore the only reason we come.
Takes over the city. So I think, is this our third time at the Fringe?
Yeah, a third time as a unit, I suppose. I did a bit of stuff before we met, but yeah, it's the third time that we...
You did nothing before we met. Your life was empty and meaningless.
Quite right. The specific reason that we are here is that we wanted to just do a little bit of Edinburgh this year. We've done 3-day stints before. This time we just come up for the day. The specific reason why we're here now is because we've just got back from a bit of travelling elsewhere. And the specific reason why we are in this bit of Edinburgh, we're currently at the Pleasance Dome and we're just going across Bristow Square in a bit to see a show at the Gilded Balloon Teviot, is because a friend of mine is part of a 4-person comedy sketch troupe called Just These Please, whose show starts in half an hour. And we've just bumped into him, actually, flyering in the Pleasance Dome, as people are wont to do for their own shows half an hour before the show is about to start at the Fringe. And there's somebody else doing it as well. You expect people to be flyering for money for somebody else, but it's quite normal to find people who do the shows flyering themselves with flyers that contain images of their own face. So it's like just tiny little celebrity encounters, although it doesn't seem to actually encourage people to go and see the shows. Anyway, we are here to see that. His name's Will Sebag-Montefiore, and he was a student at Newcastle University, but I never taught him, so that's why I call him a friend rather than an ex-student. And we're going to have lunch with Will afterwards, and then we're going to see at least 2 more things that we've booked tickets for, and then possibly see a third thing that we haven't because there's lots of free stuff on, so we've got 2 free things we might go and see. And then, lean as anything, we're leaping straight out of that last show onto a train and heading back to Newcastle, so that's today.
We've tried to mix it up a little bit more this year because normally we head straight for the comedy, and so we're going to see a play later. We did see a play last year, but that was something that we did get flyered for, and we thought, oh sure, why not? We'll give it a go. We've got a few hours free.
Interestingly, the name of the play doesn't display properly on the ticket because the ticket can't handle an E with a capital E with an accent over it, so we've got a little box.
Because it's in Irish, so it's Antigone. I think it's a mixture of myth and Irish history, which is right down my alley. We're looking forward to checking that out later.
So what comes as branching out in our lives is seeing only mostly comedy rather than entirely comedy. You know, who knows, next year we might see only half comedy.
Last year I did a bit of a write-up on my blog about everything, well, most of the things I think we did last year. So if you are interested in reading about our adventures from last year, it's at peablair.blogspot.com, something like that. I'll put a proper link in the show notes.
And of course you want to read this blog entry because I nearly died, didn't I? There was the room of spinning blades.
Well, you were killed. You were cut in half by a spinning blade.
I actually metaphorically died.
And you have a badge to prove it, because last year, and I have some videos actually, and I put some images up in the blog post of Andrew doing Nightmare live. It's really good fun.
Nightmare with a K.
Yeah.
Live,
If people remember that TV show, that very obscure British kids game show.
I'm offended. Yeah, really obscure. But also, where were you in the early 90s?
If you weren't watching that.
Yeah, if you weren't watching Nightmare.
Because it was brilliant.
Yeah. It's the one where they wear a helmet which blinded them and they were directed around by their mates, but then after a while they realised that it was all a bit silly, so they gave them a shield with an eye in it so they could actually see. I don't know how that worked.
Anyway, it was allowed to use your own eyes.
It was good crack.
Just computerised eyes.
Yeah.
I filmed little bits of it that you were in because I knew you wouldn't be able to see what was going on in the show that you'd pay for, and it was really funny because 2 of the people, I think there were 4 people altogether, who'd written in volunteering themselves to try to become the chosen one, and 2 of those people were not there, and they were 2 women as well, which was disappointing. So there was one bloke who was up first, and he was killed off really quickly because they wanted to fit in all the 4 people who'd written in. And then there there was only you left, so you had to carry most of the show. And I think you did. You made a commendable effort. You were actually very funny, but I knew it was very difficult for you because you couldn't see what you were doing. So I tried to film all the funny stuff.
Paid all that money, had to become a performer in a show, and didn't get to see the show. So yeah, you were very useful as a colleague on that particular day because you were able to film me making a prize full of myself.
I'm not able to do that this year. All I can do is record sound now. My technologies are much diminished at the moment.
I brought my iPad. I may film a few people.
With their permission, of course. So the first year we came to the Fringe, we did the last weekend, and last year we did the first weekend, and this year we're in a day right in the middle of the festival.
When we did the last weekend, the first year, Edinburgh looked tired. Edinburgh looked like it had been in through a spin cycle.
A bit traumatised.
It was knee-deep in
filthy
flyers. People were exasperated, just trying to get from A to B.
I think all the performers were at manic laughter stage. It's a really tough time if you're a creative in this city and you're here for the festival. It's so intense.
How have I heard it put? Coming to Edinburgh is like bringing rice to the biggest rice market in the world.
Yeah.
It's bringing coals to Newcastle times 10. But you know what that means is that while the performers are being beaten to within an inch of their lives by the situation, we are spoiled for choice when it comes to comedy.
I mean, part of it, like the hustling to get people to go and see your show, that's so much a part of the performance. It's a whole other performance. It's exhausting. And then supporting each other, trying to see the shows.
There's a male quartet that does a drag act, which involves lots of singing. And the way in which they go out and tout for business is they just go out in costume and just sing short songs out in public. So I suppose one thing that you'd be well advised to do if you're going to do a show in Edinburgh is something where you can just go out and do snippets of it in the street that are conspicuous. So they might be audibly conspicuous, you know, you're singing, that sound carries, or it might be spectacular in the sense of you have amazing costumes where the hats are 6 feet tall, you know, that kind of thing. Do something like that out in the street and that will get you distinguished from the crowd. But that means planning what your act is going to be with an eye to the type of place where you're going to publicise it. I suppose it's a business, and this is what one must bear in mind to prosper at it.
There's a few acts that we're quite loyal to, but we've decided to see them in Newcastle when they're on their way back down to London, because most of them are coming up from London.
This is a very good thing about living in Newcastle, particularly as acts tend to be a lot more casual in Newcastle because they're just trying stuff out on their way up. And also, for the same reason, cheaper, because they're going, I'm not sure about this, but I'll try it out for a £5 at the stand in Newcastle. So yeah, Rachel Paris usually gets our undivided attention, but when she's not getting any of it this time, because we're seeing her in about a month at the stand in Newcastle anyway.
And we're also seeing The Guilty Feminists in Northern Stage next month.
Are we?
Yes, we are. I've got tickets.
Is this the first time you've told me about this?
No.
Okay, alright, because this would be a cool instance for you to just...
It's the first time I've told you that I've decided to take you with my other ticket.
Right, okay, so...
That's how it is.
Okay, alright, it's a bit like you just proposed.
No, not really. That's not going to happen.
Well, do I get the opportunity to decide whether I want to come with you?
Maybe. But I'm trying to educate you.
It would be the second time you and I have been to see The Guilty Feminists together.
Yeah, because we came in Edinburgh last year. They happened to be here on one of the days that we were here. They could only make it for one day last year.
That wasn't planned at all.
No, but we managed to get in and get the tickets. They're coming at the end of August this time for just 2 days, so it didn't really work out anyway. But yeah, we're going to be able to see them in Newcastle. It's quite rare that they come that far north if it's not Edinburgh, so that's quite exciting.
And they get all over the shop, don't they? They've done Australia recordings.
Yeah.
And have they been to America?
Yeah, they've done LA.
So yeah, Newcastle's positively cosmopolitan compared to these backwaters. It's all going to be fun. It's never not been fun.
It's always very tiring, but there's always really good things to take away. I've got some really good memories from the past couple of years that we've come.
Yeah.
Hopefully today we'll just add to those. We'll check back in after the shows later on with some thoughts.
We may even have an interview with half of the comedy act we're about to see.
Possibly. We won't make too many promises. It's up to them if they want to. But yes, that would be nice. All right, so we will be back in a bit. We're just out of Just These Please, and it was really impressively funny.
It was so well written. They did a fantastic thing, several different variations on the, we're all going to come in without costumes on, we're just wearing these suits, and we're not going to tell you who we are, and then it will become apparent. There'll be comedy reveals during the sketch about who we are, and then everything will retrospectively become funny. So they did that loads of times. They made do with a fantastically small repertoire of props. They did upwards of 12, 13 sketches altogether, so they were rattling through them, and they were all really, really well written. They all had 4 or 5 big gags in them, the longer ones, and the short ones were just a single gag that they did inside of a minute even, They were really powering through. Oh, and Just These Please are Will, Tom, Georgie and Philippa. Just These Please is the name of the troupe, and also it seems at the moment the name of the show. Why confuse people with having a show that's got a different title from the name of your comedy quartet?
And I think the name Just These Please, it's quite telling because it's quite a polite title. There is some swearing and some naughtiness in there, but it's a very sweet and very good-natured show. There's nothing mean in it. I'm just impressed at how tight it was. There's really good use of musical excerpts in there.
I suppose when you do a fringe show like this in a tiny room that held about 60 people, you get an AV person who does a very limited lighting setup and a bit of audio, but they use both of those really, really well.
Very well.
Constantly switching to pink lights to show that they were between scenes, because they had to do loads of, not kind of rearranging of furniture, just moving around in order to get from the end of one scene to the beginning of the next, with very little going off stage as well. So then the lights would switch to say now during the next sketch. The music in between each sketch was always appropriate to the sketch that was coming up.
There's always a good link, yes.
And they were all both really good at doing loud, confident, characterful delivery. They were all getting into their characters. They were all moving really confidently for the area, for the tiny restricted area. You'd be tempted to get quite distant from your fellow performers to give them room, but no, they were all really using the room. They all clearly have done drama school training because they were doing dancing and they were doing singing at some points. It was all part of what their characters in each sketch would do.
Broad range of accents as well.
Yeah, they mastered accents. I bet that took 10 months to write. Would you like to go for a different time?
I think it took a significant amount of time and rehearsal, certainly to get it tight, and then once you know what the space is, rehearsing the transitions as well, so the moving of the chairs to position them for the next sketch coming out and to get props on and off. It takes a lot of practice and knowing how big your space is.
And because I am a friend with one of the 4 people, with Will, we are going to try, because we're going to have a spot of lunch now, we're going to try to get him to answer some questions about what's involved in doing this kind of show.
We are really super excited to be joined by Will Sebag-Montefiore. Am I saying that correctly, Will?
Paula, yeah.
I've been practicing all week. And you're from Just These Please, and we've had a really lovely time watching that this afternoon. If we could just bug you with a few questions, how would you describe the show?
The show is 25 sketches in 55 minutes, so it's very fast-paced. It's sort of silliness for grown-ups that's also quite clever.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the way I describe it.
You're very modest about that as well, Will.
Yeah, I'm very modest, but I'm also very brilliant.
I thought it was very clever as well. Now, don't give compliments lightly. So
that's recorded.
Yeah,
also.
It's recorded. It's forever. I really enjoyed it.
I'd say it's like a classic sketch show. We've seen a lot of sketch comedy, and a lot of with the advent of like stand-up comedy and character comedy, there's lots of breaking the fourth wall and chatting to the audience, which is amazing. There's a group called Princes of Maine who do it really well, and it's like this weird amalgamation of stand-up and sketch. But we were just like, let's just do sketches.
Yeah.
So it's just sketches.
There's 4 of you in the troupe. If you wouldn't mind, because we could only remember everybody's first names, if you wouldn't mind just rhyming everybody's names off.
Yeah, it's Philippa Carson, Georgie Jones, Tom Dixon, and myself, William Sebag-Montefiore. The silliest name.
And so, and you're all a bunch of young professionals.
We are, yes.
Young educated professionals, all trying to make your way in the world of showbiz things.
Mm-hmm. With day jobs.
That's how it's done nowadays, really, isn't it? Because
it's
just so hard to exist and get a good foot on the ladder, really.
Yeah, out of the 30 people who graduated from my year at drama school, there's only one of them who has not got a secondary job. And I think that's probably quite a high number, 1 in 30. Everyone has other stuff that they have to do because it's changed so much. But that's the compromise you make when you're doing something that you love. It's not necessarily financially stable, but it's what you want to do.
And you're on in the Gilded Balloon in the
Yes.
Fringe, which is probably one of the better known locations, venues. Would you mind explaining how you even got into that? Because it's your first Fringe as a group.
Yeah, it's our first ever Fringe as a group. I repeated that just so if you were going to cut the question, now you can just cut straight in, but now you have to cut this bit. So. We got into Gilded Balloon because we'd been gigging in London and just trying stuff out, and the Fringe was always the aim because we wanted to do stuff, and we found doing things off our own back was the only way to make that happen, and gave us agency in a career that has so little agency and is often not a meritocracy. There are so many variables that can go. You can be the best, like amazing, do a great job, and they're like, no, he's too small, which is the nature of the beast. It's just that's how it works.
That sounded close to home.
It wasn't actually. I've never
Too
had
small?
the too small. I've never, and you never tend to find out. It's the other thing. There are just so many variables involved. But we were like, we have this thing, we work well together, we like working together, let's make something. So did it in theatres in London. The way the Fringe works is you contact people. We contacted all the big ones, the Assembly, the Pleasance, Gilded Balloon, Underbelly, and a bunch of the smaller ones. A couple of places offered us places, and Gilded Balloon and Pleasance came to see us at the Vault Festival, because we managed to get into the Vault Festival and do a one-night show. Gilded Balloon, after seeing it, really liked us, and the guy from Pleasance, he was like, look, I can come to your show, but I can only stay for 10 minutes, and the show before us ran over. So he could stay for like a minute. So he really kindly still came and was like, oh, send me more of your stuff. But then Gilded Balloon offered us a place off the back of that. And so it was a nice balance of hard work on our part, getting someone in, doing a show that was good enough that people thought, hey, this will work in our venue. And also the kindness of the venues going, oh yeah, we'll come and take a chance on someone we've never heard of. That's how we got in. So it is sort of, anyone can do it, but it takes a lot of variables to come into place.
It must be a testament though to how well the earlier incarnations of the show work. If they thought, well, yeah, we will give you a chance.
Yeah, I think so. I think we all invested in it because we thought that it was good, which I don't think makes us unique in Edinburgh. I think everyone here thinks what they're doing is good, but yeah, definitely it must have been, and still is.
We found it was tight, you know, we were laughing consistently. I really liked that the jokes weren't mean, it was very good natured. A lot of it was fairly innocent. That's quite refreshing in a world where everybody's backbiting.
I don't know why we sort of made that choice. I think it's the idea of someone coming in. We don't like going to see shows and feeling uncomfortable, like the people on stage aren't looking after us. And I think there's definitely place for biting social commentary, which we love, but we just wanted to make people laugh, and we're like, this is the way we've done it, and we sort of spend a lot of... I think the one group of people who came to see our show who'd be upset by it might be careers advisors. There's one line which I completely disagree with, which is sort of belittling the work of a careers advisor. And the only reason I know you two is from Newcastle, because my careers advisor told me to go there, and I've ended up doing exactly what I'm doing because of my careers advisor. It really keeps me up at night, and that's for one point in the show to do that. I think, yeah, it's not offensive, but I think it's not offensive, but also it doesn't, like, we would never not joke about something, but we like people having nice times.
So to put it in context, you had a 12-15 slot in a roughly 60-seat venue that was in the basement, I think. We went up and down a lot of stairs to get to that venue.
I think it's on just below the ground floor. I don't know.
Of the Gilded Balloon.
Yeah.
As far as I could tell, every single seat, or nearly every single seat, was taken. I was cheek by jowl with several fellow humans there.
Yeah, it's
They were
very intimate.
tightly packed in. And you seem to have been selling that many tickets so far?
Yeah, the past 5 or 6 days we've essentially sold out. Yesterday there was only 10 seats empty, today there was only about 3, which I think constitutes a sellout. I don't know. That's the thing that's really been like, oh gosh, this is remarkable, because we struggled to get reviews in at the start, but we're selling very well. It's just word of mouth. It's friends, family, and people saying, hey, go and see this. And then it's also strangers. There's so many strangers coming to see it and liking it.
Which is really nice.
Before coming, everyone was like, oh, word of mouth is what gets you. And I was like, whatever, that can't be. We've got social media now. We don't need to talk to people. But you'll hear the same shows over and over again being said. And that's the only reason I can see that we've sold tickets. It's amazing.
Could we ask you about your flyer and your poster as well?
Yes.
Because like this is such a massive part of the Fringe. Like it's an integral part of even the visual culture of the Fringe is just the postering and the flyering. Just to describe it, it's very pleasing purple background.
More purple.
Your lovely
In the world.
the Stays Please logo. It's the circle there is actually reminding me a little bit of the rival, you know, how they do the writing in Arrival.
The plots, the aliens in Arrival, they're like...
I haven't seen Arrival.
It's actually really very similar, the circle around the face, please. Yeah.
They communicate in nearly complete circles with little tails in them. It's like octopus ink.
That's their like. Anyway, so it's just these plays, sketch comedy, and the four of you looking very happy. And, it's a really lovely photo. You're arranged in height formation, and it's just very clear. And then on the back of the flyer, you're in the outfits that you wear during the show, which is the suits and the funky ties. How did you go about designing, planning for doing the photo shoot?
There were a couple of things that we knew we had to do or wanted to do. One which was have all of our faces on it, because at a glance that's what you want. You want people to recognise the poster and the faces. That's what's on stage, that's what people are going to see, that's what you're selling. We sort of were like, we want to be ourselves, we want to look like our comedy. We didn't want to be like, oh, we're so wacky. But we're approachable and quite lovely.
Was it anyone in particular's idea that you would all wear suits and ties?
I think it might have been Tom's, but I can't, that might be just because he's a full-time solicitor. And it was like, I don't want to change. No, but it was like... There's a sketch group called the Pajama Men, an old sketch group, two guys who wear pyjamas, because pyjamas are quite a neutral thing that you can put anything onto. So it's that sort of idea of being what's a vaguely neutral but thought through thing to wear. And I think I quite like the idea of us trying to be grown-ups but not really succeeding, so putting suits on. Really a slightly arbitrary choice that we were like, okay, yeah, we'll wear suits, and it works really well, I think, for the sketches. And then Philippa decided to buy some white suits on Amazon. She was like, let's just try these, and then we tried them on the purple background and loved them. And we thought it was like, we've put on our best suits to do the poster, and then on the back you can see what we actually do.
Because it's quite a simple idea, but it's striking. There's these lovely block colours and a pleasing formation amongst this noise of other posters when you see them on the wall. So I think it works.
Yeah,
it's
I think it commits to the rule of three as well, I think. We've got the logo, the faces, and then the bottom text. The logo, the idea was like a tea stain where you put the cup down. That was the vague inspiration for that. But our friend Luke DeBelder is a friend of ours who designs stuff, and we gave him a vague... We took thousands of pictures. We had a friend take pictures for us. There are loads of different formations, but this one just we liked. And the confetti was a real confetti gun that then was like doctored to have more confetti.
Is Georgie Welsh?
No, she's not.
No, she's not. No, but she does a good Welsh accent.
I know. So Philippa's from Ireland. Georgie, her second name is Jones, but she's English. But I'm English and Tom's Scottish, so we could have been...
Because you're almost a Four Nations.
Yeah. Could have been. But Philippa's Republic of rather than Northern Ireland, so we couldn't have been the UK. So
Georgie must have Welsh relatives.
You'd hope so. Because then it would just an Englishman, an Irishman and a Scotsman walk into a pub.
It was a little bit shocking, it seems, for a couple of the other members of the audience at 2 points. And the first was when Tom went, get ye fuck. There was some intakes of breath at that point. And
at that point, Tom's playing a smoothie.
And yes, the kind of smoothie that you buy in a shop in a cold cabinet. A refreshing drink smoothie.
What was the other point?
And the other point was when Georgie put the gun in her mouth.
Yeah,
that was a bit dark, wasn't it?
Maybe it shows just how willingly we suspend disbelief. That one person could go, oh yeah, that's a person holding a gun, even though I know it's made of plastic and can't possibly ever fire anything. And she's put it in her mouth.
It's just a shocking image, I think, and the idea of suicide, especially with the joke is that she's a PA doing it on behalf of the boss.
I think that's actually got slightly darker because it used to just be, spoilers everybody, the premise is a PA being sent on the behalf of the boss for a catch-up. So the PA has to do everything that the boss says, and the natural extension of that is the boss gets her to kill herself on his behalf, so he doesn't have to go through with it. So it's like a very silly, just natural extension of a joke. But as soon as you bring suicide into things, especially in the current climate, it's like, ooh, I don't know if that's... But I think what's changed it in performance is Georgie used to just put the gun in her mouth and fire it, but now has been playing with the like she doesn't want to. So I think that it gives the audience time to go, oh god. That's probably the darkest we get. I think it sounds darker in conversation.
The astonishing moments of levity in there as well, like the four Scots waiting for the big
that was probably
orange
my
thing.
This rare beacon of light.
That's another Tom sketch, is being a Scotchman.
It seems that we're alighting all the Tom sketches here, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, well I mean they're all like, all the sketches are, all four of us have input and change and stuff. It's just the initial spark of an idea. So every single sketch in the show has been edited by all of us.
Is there a sketch or two in there that definitely started with you?
Yeah, the Bag for Life sketch was my own, which is just a conversation with your bag for life. who feels neglected.
Because they never really are for life, are they?
No,
It's a false,
they're just for Christmas.
They're just for carrying your messages a couple of times.
Were you dead set on it being Philippa, who would be the bag from the outset?
No, we've played that in different parts, so we try and keep the casting quite general. So Georgie and I have done it, Tom and Georgie have done it. All the parts we sort of interchange.
Oh, good.
So.
Right. So it's a totally unique show every time then?
Well, no, in Edinburgh we've kept it the same just for ease and to make sure everyone gets a good representation.
You do seem to have a relatively fair balance of who was and wasn't on stage at any one time.
Yeah, we tried our best to do that. We were worried that some people didn't have as much, and I felt I got given loads more punchlines. We spend so much time talking about making sure that it's like, because I think there's that gross thing sometimes of going to see a sketch show and being like, oh, it's that person's show and they've got their mates to join in. And I think we don't have that. I think it'd be hard to pinpoint who'd written what and who'd brought what to the table, which we quite like.
You also do some quite adult things.
Yes.
Whose
In a
idea
very
was
sweet
it?
way as well, needs to be said.
That was Philippa and Georgie's. Initially when Tom and I had written the bulk of the show when we first brought this to the girls and said, hey, should we do this? And they were like, yeah, great. Doesn't pass the Bechdel test though, does it, boys? Because Tom and I had always written from a male perspective and written for ourselves. And so working with them, we were like, oh God, that's not something that being, open and liberal, worldly people and feminists, we were like, how did that happen? But it's just so funny how ingrained it is to be like, he says this as soon as you start writing something. So Philippa was like, I want to write more sketches with just women in it. I just want to have a girl like talking to a vagina. And we were like, that sounds great. And then it just extended from there. So it was Philippa's idea.
I suppose being in a black group, everything's black, and where you're in really close quarters with loads of other people, it's one of those sorts of spaces where people are primed to entertain all of these fantastical possibilities that are being set in front of them. And I just think the basic fantastical possibility of, even though I'm a person who's wearing a suit in front of you have to imagine that I'm something else. So you have to, what was the prop work that you did, the bag for life I suppose would be the best version of this. I'm a person wearing a suit, but I've got a bag on my head with a head hole in it. You have to imagine that I'm just the bag. So you seem to be aware that you can get an audience generally to go with that, I'm not going to change my costume or anything, but from now on you must imagine that I'm utterly differently costumed than how I am now. Like when you were Dumbledore, for example. Dumbledore don't dress like that. And it must be tempting to just be constantly putting on and off costumes, but you seem to have gone, actually this needs to be completely minimalist.
I think it adds a bit of noise, and also I think if you're not doing it really, really well, I think what you lose in the transition time, because our sketches are so quick, we jump from sketch to sketch. Yeah. If we had a minute-long costume change, we'd have to add something in to fill that. This is why we started doing it on stage, because Tom was like, I've written a sketch that's on a boat, and if we film that, we have to get a boat. But if we say, hey, welcome to the boat, everyone goes, okay, I guess we're on a boat now.
Yeah.
I found myself completely willing to go with, okay, we're in this environment. Yeah. I go with that.
Philip and I specifically did a lot of improvisation, and there's the sort of rules of improv. There's a term that they use which is ironic detachment, so trying to avoid ironic detachment. And I think we try very hard to play the sincerity of the conversation between a bag for life and its owner as if it was a real relationship. If the audience are laughing, I think we try and maintain the tension and hold it. But if there's a sort of tongue-in-cheek, this is funny, isn't it? For me, that always pulls me out of it. There are two people who are like, well, this can't be a bag fight. Well, I guess there's a bag, fine, okay. I think you can push through. There's quite a thin barrier of suspension of disbelief that people are willing to just let you take.
There was a few moments where I thought, what these people are doing in front of us now is absurd. But I'm never finding myself going, I'm in a room watching some people doing some absurd things.
Try doing it every month, every day for a month. You get up and you're like, what's my job today? I've got to go and pretend to be a Willy and then fight for life. And it's very strange. It's sort of a frivolous and strange thing to do.
But it all made complete sense within the drama of each scene. And those were serious smoothies. Those smoothies were about to kill each other. They knew exactly how to be whimsical.
The whimsical smithy. I'm the most whimsical smithy.
And that brings us to the badge that you get if you survive the show. You get a lovely badge.
You will survive the show.
How many thousands of those badges do you have?
I think we had enough to give out 37 per show.
Right.
So it was, reasonable.
Well, I've put my badge in my pocket.
So you get a little call back with the monocled frog.
We also have otters playing xylophones as well, but we didn't have them today.
There was a couple of very neat callbacks within the sketches, but you kept them relatively discreet by and large.
The biggest one I think is the minty one in the meeting between the vagina and the penis.
Yeah.
We never thought that would get a laugh. It's one of those really strange things that audiences there's a trade secret here that audiences are quite stupid sometimes. And if they just recognise something... No, audiences aren't stupid. They're very smart and very brave, and please keep coming to see us. It sort of becomes like an in-joke for that room of people, because it's like, oh, that happened, we were there, yeah, that was funny. And there's something, I think our sketches about things that people recognise, like our Meghan Markle and Kate Middleton sketch, people are like, oh, there's a double laugh when it's like, oh yeah, great, I know where we are.
I really appreciated that a lot of the sketches were very conscious of being gender neutral, and the whole woman interacting with bits of her body stuff was really refreshing as well. It was just nice to have those sorts of things normalised and it just not be an issue. You know, the vagina and the penis meeting, going, oh shall we do this? Oh, are you sure you'd like to? Oh yes, please. Oh, okay, let's do that. No, it's not that way. It's a bit more okay.
Yeah, it's something that I think we're all very conscious of, is listening to each other in the group, and specifically for Tom and I, who initially had written most of it, but now it's, like I said, it's very much a homogenous, all four of us making it. There's a sketch that we don't have anymore that used to have the word bitch in it. It was a male character saying to a female character, you heartless bitch. And it was a heightened moment, it was very silly. And I'd written the line and was like, oh, that's very funny. And then Philippa said, she was like, I don't think that's a good word for us to be saying. I was like, I genuinely don't see the problem, but let's go with that, because I don't understand what it's like to have that word used against me. And then we came up with a funnier word. I can't remember what it was, but we ended up saying something sort of inane and childish that actually was funnier because it took away the status of the male character. But it's just about listening. When Tom and I first started writing, we always wrote for men, and now I always try and write from a female perspective first, because sketches tend to be neutral people delivering an idea. Therefore, why not just write it as a woman? Because my natural thing is just to write as a man, so I could just change that and just imagine Georgie and Philippa doing it. Big old liberal pat on the back for Will. But it is just because of the women in my life that I have been aware of that. And I think it's important sometimes with comedy and something so silly and like it's a novelty, and you know, we're doing sketches, you can sort of be like, it doesn't matter. It's easier to make a heteronormative relationship read because that's what's in the mainstream, so let's just go with that. But it's funnier to do different things, I think. Don't remember if you asked the question, but I monologued.
Yeah, so I thought the one with the teenage boy being very embarrassed about sex is very cute. It seems like the dad's going to have the talk, but then it transpires that actually the family have bets on what he may or may not have done yet. And it was just nice that it was they rather than a gendered pronoun, and it was a name that could apply to anybody, you know, that kind of thing. And it was just funny more because this person was known as Stinky Joe Pearson. Is that it?
That's something we just find really funny, is people who have described like, oh, what? Annoying Dave? Or like, Adverb Dave. Yeah, Slimy Adam. Oh no. We just find that very funny. And interestingly, I automatically chose two male names there.
Do you know what's up for you guys after the Fringe, apart from a massive rest and hibernation period?
No, I don't know. We're all, well, myself, Georgie and Philippa are all professional actors, and Tom is a solicitor. The idea
in his own way, also a professional actor.
Yeah. The idea is that this will gain us a bit of momentum. It's quite hard to plan because it's so based on so many other things. All that will definitely happen is I'll go back home for a little bit and then go back to London, and we'll keep writing and keep doing stuff.
If you're all still alive next year.
Oh yeah, we will be. We're very resilient.
Will you do it again?
Definitely. Yeah. Depends, because Tom, I don't think, can take this much holiday off every year. So we'll have to work around that, but we will, because it's the thing that we're committed to, and we'd love to do more stuff with it. The idea is for Just These Please to become a big thing that we can make stuff under. How vague. A thing we can make stuff under. A tarpaulin? No.
Well, I did notice that you didn't give the show a name.
Yeah, we didn't.
Many great bands have done that with their very first album, Foo Fighters, for example. Yeah. The name's the same as the title.
People can only be expected to remember one new thing.
Exactly. You've got a whole load of months, like 2 months, to come up with an original title for a new show.
And where did Just These Please come from as a name?
Tom came up with it. It was we're quite charming, and Tom and I are both bumbling and a bit silly and British, and oh dear. And it was the idea of saying Just These Please when you put something down at a shop. You go, Just These Please, because you want to be polite and say, hey, I'm a nice person. You don't really know what to say, so you say Just These Please as if you needed to qualify, because you wouldn't be having the other.
Just cigarettes for me, thank you.
I suppose it's a way of not saying, please will you sell me these items?
Yeah.
While at the same time saying, please will you sell me these items?
Yeah.
And nothing else. I don't want any more things, just these.
Yeah. It's also like, we're saying just these, please, just the sketches. It sort of doesn't really matter what it means anymore, because that's where it came from, but it's just a name that people keep forgetting.
Do you call it JTP or something for short?
We do when we can't be bothered to type it, and I insist on the comma being between just these and please. I don't know if that will last, because it makes search engine
It's
optimization
difficult for
very
hashtagging, for sure.
Yes, it is. Yeah, terrible.
Well, we've had a really great time. So even if the rest of our day is rubbish, we've had this time with you.
Yeah,
It's been very special.
So thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks for having
so
me.
much for talking to us. You've worked very hard today and you deserve a rest.
Well, thank you. Thanks for interviewing.
Will, would you like to plug Just These Please? Where can we find you on the interwebs?
Oh, very good. We're at Just These Please on Twitter, but someone else stole Just These Please, so it's JUSTHESEP. So it's Just These Please, but with one fewer
So it's just
With the T missing.
Yeah, Just These Please is what it says.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we're on justtheseplease.com. If you search Just These Please into Google, you'll find us, and we just released a sketch that has like 2.5 million views, which is very new to
Which is called?
us. Which is called When You Order Coffee with an Irish Name.
Excellent.
It's written by Philippa and Georgie, or Georgie and Philippa actually, is Georgie's main idea. So this is the difficulty. Start naming it, but yeah, Georgie wrote it and Philippa wrote a verse for it as well. And then we filmed it all together and Philippa edited it, and our friend Kieran Craig and Hayley Bishop did the filming and ADing and stuff. Yeah, you can find us online. Just search Just These Please.
Fab, thank you.
Thank you.
So yet again, I'm thanking you for having indulged me by going to a thing that I
Yes.
want to do.
Well, I wanted to do that one as well, but before that you had a really nice encounter with a jaunty chap from my neck of the woods, didn't you? On the flyering Paul Curry.
Curry, yeah, I forgot his last name for a moment. There, yeah. I was the wrong person to bump into Paul Curry.
Oh,
You would have been the ideal person.
I would have left
In
him
fact-
alone. I wouldn't have gone over to him.
In fact, what I should have done was just go, wait there, I have to go and fetch my girlfriend, because
And then I would have hit you one for calling me that.
she'd like to come and lick you. So
Not really, no, he's a bit too hairy.
he is as hairy as possible to be.
Paul's great. Paul is a puppeteer and a very funny man from Northern Ireland who does the Fringe every year, and we saw him a couple of years ago and we have neglected him for a while. Hopefully the next time he's in Newcastle we'll go and see him.
I think when you see someone flyering for a show that they're doing this Fringe and you're definitely not going to see their show, but you considered it at some point, you become the most fawning person it's possible to be. So I was pumping his hand. Anyway, so the thing that we just did was, I hadn't noticed this actually, that it was performed by
It's an Italian troupe.
Yes, there's a group of, I think, 9 people altogether called I Bugiardini. Their names were all put up in credits at the end and they all were Italian names. There was a good 7 people who were doing performance, and then there was a guy who was writing the intertitles,
As they were doing it.
live writing intertitles, and the chap at the piano.
Sometimes
as
you
well.
could even hear the typing happening. It was that live, the intertitles. So yes, it was called Shhh, an improvised silent movie. So of course we had to go to this.
Yeah, couldn't not.
I couldn't really have been anybody but Italians because they continue to have probably the most respect for the silent era of film.
Yeah, they put even
Arguably.
the early British cinema nerds to shame, the Italians, with their reverence for it. Playful reverence, of course, because early cinema is dominated by comedy, and they acknowledge that, and so even though it was supposed to be a drama that they were improvising, they slapped in loads of moments of
Very
comedy.
dark comedy as well. We were having a day of dark comedy mixed with innocent comedy. And yes, it was really effective, really wonderful performances. Particularly, there was a couple of people playing. Well, one guy was playing a dog, another was playing a cat, and they were particularly funny.
Yeah.
And there was a bit of gender mixing because there was a woman playing a man very effectively and a man playing a woman, probably in a very camp way. Both were camp, but it was very effective getting across the types of character that they were playing.
This is something we find ourselves observing all the time when you play the sex that you're not. You don't have any costume or makeup on your side, you have to play a
exaggerating
caricature
it.
of that.
And of course,
sex.
the guy playing the woman was coded very much as a flapper, I would say. So it's channeling that effectiveness of the performance of the flapper girl and of men in that era of being very macho, pipe smoking, having a big gnarly dog.
But your drama conventions of the era include lots of poking fun at forms of hyper-masculinity.
Yes.
So plenty of that as well. They knew their tropes. Loved a bit of that. So I suppose we ought to describe the format. The format is we come in and there's two guys standing at the front of the auditorium, completely silent,
Holding cards
saying,
directing you what to do.
please sit down.
Please sit down, and the best views from the centre.
And we sat in the front row, and then after everyone was sat down, they got a nod from the floor manager from the back of the room, and then they got out new cards, and the principle was someone in the audience had to write down on a slate that one of them was holding the title of a job. They did it several times.
We had to keep going until we got the right one.
Yeah,
I got the impression.
So if people wanted to rub out whatever was on the slate and put a new one on, we could, and then we did a kind of reckoning up between it was an undertaker and what was the other one?
Somebody suggested steeplejack. Somebody suggested...
There was
That's terrible, I can't remember now.
There was several that it came down to, and there's lots of how loud are you applauding. So the film, what we chose for the title of the film was The Undertaker. And then they started to improvise this film, and the way that was done was that the screen that was, I'd say, about 3 feet in front of the front row of seats had behind it a performance area, such that when you turned the lights on in the performance area, you could barely see the screen, but when you turn them off, you could project something onto that screen. There was lots of title footage at the beginning, and then that projector would go off, and the lights behind the screen would go on, so there was lots of slick lighting cues happening. And then within that performance space, performers would come on from either side with a limited number of props and do some improv. I initially started to think they've got a repertoire and they're picking from their repertoire. But then after all, I started thinking, if they are, they're adapting it really, really well to the principle of one of the characters is an undertaker, because that was the job that was chosen. They did do comedy along the lines of this character has to pick up this other character, and this performer isn't strong enough, so let's make a joke out of that. There was a bit more of the ironic detachment that Will was saying they didn't do in Just These Please earlier. But ironic detachment, when one is doing a show about silent cinema, is basically the default setting, isn't it? Because people laugh at silent films so much, even when they're not at all comedic. Even when they're dead straight, people laugh at them because they're so strange. So I suppose that's quite a permissible thing in general habit. After a bit of initial, wow, this seems like it's going nowhere, they wove it into quite a tight story, actually.
Yes, there was lots of little vignettes. Initially, they chose The Undertaker, so it started with there's lots of different ways to die. Yeah. So there was a little darkly comic and people throwing themselves off buildings, and some people falling asleep at the wheel of a car and crashing, or accidentally knocking somebody off a building, that sort of thing, just to get you in the mood for this story. And then maybe when those are happening, they're deciding, right, this is the kind of story that we're going to try to do. It's hard to know though, because I was very convinced that they've got a few set storylines. Maybe they've got a core storyline that they adapt to whatever profession is chosen. The storyline with the relationship with the person doing that job that's chosen, and then they have the relationship with this person and it breaks down for whatever reason, whatever job's chosen, it's just fitted onto that core story.
That would make sense of why the scenes in the graveyard, the things that were specific to being an undertaker, were a bit rough around the edges, to say the least.
Disjointed, yes. I thought it was interesting, all of the people involved in the troupe seem to clearly have physical attributes. They have a specific talent, or they have something odd about their body that they use. I think it was the same person who was playing the woman in the relationship. Pamela, I think the name was of the character. This person had very wiggly fingers and was using them to play flickering candlelight. Very tall people were playing birds, crows and things like that. The shorter people were playing the animals, the dog and the cat.
We often think of early film acting as being singularly weird, the kind of acting that you don't do in other performance forms, but actually it's just very elementary mime combined with other forms of silent performance like pantomime. Put all those together, you get silent film performance. So anyone learning now doing physical comedy will learn some of the ways of using your body that were used by everyone in silent films. Someone to go, right, I want you to show without blinking that you're fluttering your eyelashes. So how do you do that? Well, you take your hands, you put your thumbs in and you splay your 4 fingers and you put them up by your eyes and you go, whack, you go. This is a great podcast, and you wave your fingers.
Twinkle them, yeah.
Twinkle your fingers.
But yes, and I love the way that Pamela gets a new bow, her old bow, turns up, and she's showing off the engagement ring, and so she's holding out the hand.
And there's no ring on the hand.
There's no ring, of course, but then you using the other hand to flash this dazzling diamond. The timing, of course, is everything.
All accentuated by the pianist, who's doing a cracking job, because there's both playing music that achieves tone and playing notes that are closer to sound effects than music, and trying to go, this is a sound effect rather than this is music, is really tricky. It's often along the lines of, if you're just hammering the same note again and again, or the same chord again and again, and if it's quite a bass note as well, that tends to come across as, oh, that's somebody slamming a door, rather than this is just really insistent music. There's work to do there nonetheless, and he was doing it very well.
There was a lot of the Undertaker character was supposed to be very strong, so he's too strong sometimes and breaks things, pulls off door handles or thumps things down really heavily. So the piano was doing the heavy lifting there of the sound effects.
He was doing the metaphorical heavy lifting about the literal
Yes,
heavy
exactly,
lifting.
yes. Which itself was quite figurative because it was pretend. He's lifting air.
The metaphorical heavy lifting about the metaphorical heavy lifting that refers to some literal heavy lifting.
Yes.
That's how meta performance gets. It was clear that they had not just seen a lot of silent films, but seen some specific films. The idea of a character who just doesn't appreciate how strong they are, that's ringing such a bell. There's a specific comedy from about 1911. Right,
That's Lenny in Of Mice and Men.
but that's not a
But
comedy.
that's, of course, it's tragedy.
Yeah. Sure, there was a comedy from about 1911 where a character somehow, takes a potion or something. I think it might be a Max Linder film called A Cure for Cowardice, and the French title translates as a medicine for strength, and he takes this medicine to stop being a coward and becomes unnaturally both brave and strong. And so there's a lot of comedy in people not knowing to expect how strong they are. Also, the two rivals for a woman's affection, that's in about every other silent film, so there's
very
content specific to the period there too. All round, lots of fun. I'm very glad we sat in the front row.
I think, though, the interesting thing about that is that we could see quite a lot of what was going on the sides, and probably if we were further back, that would have been a bit more of a surprise to us.
Yeah, it was very funny that at certain points, people who are in the wings not being part of that particular skit or particular scene, they'd laugh at what people were doing in the scene. The bit, I think, when the woman who was playing the big heavy guy, when she was carried off stage, and when she was put down, for some reason, she found it just utterly hilarious what had just been done. And her face, I could just about see it, and she was desperately trying to stop herself from laughing, from having done that. But this is another instance of what we saw this morning. It's what we're going to put in front of you is not supposed to look like what it represents. We are calling upon you to do a bit of willing suspension of disbelief. So when the main Undertaker character, Kevin, throws his rival, literally throws him out the door, he mimed throwing, while another performer came on, grabbed the heavy, who was actually just a small girl, stuck her on his shoulder, and then lifted her off into the wings to mime being thrown. You can mime interacting with things that aren't there, and you can mime being the subject of the actions of things that aren't there as well. And if you put those two together, you can have somebody being thrown off by someone else. And again, something which worked within the scenario. There was no me going, oh, that's somebody pretending to do that. It was me going, that's somebody pretending very well to give an impression of doing that.
Yeah, it's the thing, that was it. It was the inventiveness often was what was funny. It's, oh gosh, that's really clever actually. You wouldn't think of doing that to emulate that action, but that really works because it's very clearly communicating what they're doing. And of course they're crossing several language barriers. They're Italian. It means that they can travel, they can do this. It doesn't matter about the language. They just need somebody with doing the intertitles who can communicate fluently enough in whatever language the country has as its dominant language. But also it's that language of silent cinema that's so alien and quite foreign now to people now, because it's 100 years ago this was the norm.
Did you notice that when they mocked up a bit of logo footage at the beginning, it was the logo footage for Universal?
Yes, I noticed very
and
much.
Universal was formed in 1913. Also, the guy at the piano did the music from the Universal. In 1913, when the Universal Film Company was formed, out of a conglomeration of about 12 existing film companies, it was called Universal because the idea was already around at that point that film is a universal language. And so for them to choose that is a little nod to that idea of film being not necessarily a language, because language actually has specific characteristics and film doesn't fit those characteristics, but a universal, a non-linguistically specific communication means. And they were having a damn good go at doing that. That was like an Italian, mildly comedic, melodramatic piece of drama, which had been given creative English intertitles, which was a norm at the time.
According to some scholar friends of mine who are Italian and who work on Italian cinema, one friend in particular who specialised in Italian comedy, Italian comedies are really quite dark.
Yeah.
And very tragic. Often, when we were all living in Belfast, he showed us some of these Italian comedies that he was looking at. And the rest of us who were British, Irish, American, we didn't understand why they were funny, because they were quite distressing. That darkness and it being about death and the Undertaker and that funny edge in the quite dark and tragic was very befitting.
I do wonder whether there was a bit of manipulation of that audience decision making at the beginning. The audience, we came up with about 6 different titles, and it wasn't that we whittled those down through a process of elimination to 2 that we then voted on. It was that the guy stopped the process when he had Undertaker, put another one back on that had been
made us clap for one more than the other. No, I have no doubt that it was. If we had got the board, we probably would have blown their minds with early film historian. What would you do with that in a silent early film?
You put your hand up. Is that what you wanted to write?
That's what I was going to write. What were you going to write?
I was going to write investment banker.
Oh, right. I thought you were going to do... Oh, no, I would have written early film historian. Just to...
Blown there.
Just to blow their
It's
stuff
like
up.
putting a mirror in front of a mirror.
Just make it really meta. Have to look into the future. One day this will be studied and it will be very important. Everyone will care very much about it.
Good stuff all round, very fun.
It was really good fun. So the next thing we're going to see is we're just waiting to see Antigone and so we'll check in a bit with how that has gone.
Sure.
So we're not long out of
Antigone and Heron.
We're in the queue to see if we can get into the Skeptics at the Edinburgh Fringe. We were hoping to see Bisha K. Ali and Kima Bob, but Antigone Heron started late and ran over, so we just didn't make it for that one. So we're here. This was our contingency.
We might not even get into this one.
We might not get into this one, so we'll see how that goes. The play was intense. It was probably a bit more intense than the actual conflict ever was. It's set in the near future, and Brexit has messed everything up, torn Northern Ireland apart from the Republic of Ireland. Apparently there's an assembly again. It's very much the same old legacies of absent fathers, stuff that's been done a million times before, only this time it's been handed over to some women, but they still are concerned only with what their fathers ever wanted instead of getting on with their own lives. One of the main characters, Annie, she's very religious, very Catholic. The Lord's Prayer keeps being repeated throughout the play. She and her other siblings, her sister and 2 brothers, their father died apparently during the conflict. They were taken in as children by their uncle, who in this reality is a prominent member of Sinn Féin. It's apparently situated in West Belfast. Most of the actors seem to be Scottish and had a good crack at the accents, although one character was from Derry and all the rest of the characters were supposed to be from Belfast, but they all sounded more Derry than the Derry character did. But they're very difficult accents, so we won't. I think my main criticisms were actually they didn't really seem to know much about anything that the play was about. It was under-researched. The actors were all brilliant. They worked really hard, did a good job with the material that they had, I thought. But their material was very under-researched. It was very talky. There was a lot of stuff about the disappeared kept getting mentioned in a very vague way, but when details were given, they were all entirely wrong. So things like dozens and dozens of bodies when there were 17. The fictional characters that they refer to as being disappeared were all Protestant, not only that, but prominent loyalists. That kind of thing never happened. It was usually people who were in the Catholic or nationalist communities, usually accused of some kind of informing or being traitors, and most of the time it was probably mistaken identity, or it was just a sign to the community, this is what we will do to you if you do inform. The play was even more tit for tat than the actual conflict was in many ways. One thing was there's a character called Erin who is undercover and is actually a leader in the new incarnation of loyalist paramilitaries they call the Red Hand. What was it? It was the RHU Red Hand Union.
Red Hand of Ulster.
Red Hand of Ulster. I don't know, there was something, wasn't terribly imaginative, but anyway, this character, she played it with quite a lot of compassion, which in a way was different from the typical depiction of the loyalist thug, because usually they were standalone as she was, but they were usually psychotic and really enjoying torturing people. They probably wouldn't have just done away with people the way that she does.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's the writer not knowing how it all works, or
trying to have to fit it into the plot of Antigone, because let's remember that it had
well,
that
exactly,
as a
yes. It's framed around Antigone and the stories of Sophocles, and then it's got all these religious inflections. I wonder as well if they've maybe tried to take on more than they could handle.
Yeah.
So the writer is James Began, I think it is. Maybe they're just young and starting out. I don't know who this person is. But yeah, I suppose it's a good attempt, and everybody worked really hard, so you can't really fault anybody for being all in. There's a wee bit of lesbianism thrown in there for good measure. Representation is good, but not if it's just shoehorned in for the crack.
Or
yeah.
is it associated with betrayal?
Exactly, and it being sinful. One thing I would commend the play for was that it did make the point of there being a multiplicity of Irelands. So what Ireland is to everybody is a very individual thing. And what it meant to the previous generation, the revolutionary generation, was very different from what it meant to the younger people. And the younger people, it seemed, felt they were crumbling under the pressure of trying to keep that up. And it just doesn't really exist anymore. If that had been explored a bit more and a bit more effectively, I probably would have warmed to the play a bit more. But as it was, I think it just got buried under needless, pointless violence. A lot of just very simplistic killing that didn't really move anything anywhere. Maybe that was the point of it, but it's not really reflective of the current climate, and it's set, in 2019. In 2018, this just feels like, no, this just isn't right. This just is really quite silly, especially with we're at a point where there's no sitting assembly. There hasn't been an assembly in Northern Ireland for over a year and a half, and to be referring to Stormont and dealing with the price of milk, it just feels like, well, we wish we could get back to that, actually.
It felt like it was written after the Brexit referendum. I just called it the breakfast referendum. After the referendum. But before the Assembly stopped assembling. That window of time was quite a small window of time, wasn't it?
It was quite a small window of time, and it was quite a long time ago, it feels now. And a lot's happened, and a lot of key figures have died, have retired. So it's very difficult to write something like that and to make it relevant, because the ground is shifting underneath us so quickly. It's a very difficult area to research. I just really haven't been trying lately, because every day something new has blown up. Somebody else has lit a bin on fire, and it's so hard to keep up with everything. To try and do something creative in that, let's try to do something actually quite big, like reuniting Ireland and that cause, and not really understanding what that was. It just misses the mark for me anyway, I think. But we have probably audibly changed location. The Skeptics queue is quite large, and it seemed like it was going to start quite late, and we were worried about making our train, so we thought we'd just chill out, have a drink, have a decompress, because if you try to do too much at Edinburgh, it gets really overwhelming. And I think 3 big things today was actually quite a good day.
People have died trying to do more than 4 things. I have to give some credit to the Antigone the Heron team for being pretty fearless when it came to showing humans getting into conflicts where they're brutalised. Making it something that's actually set in the real world may have been the mistake. Maybe it should have been that they would just set it in an alternative world where the names of the factions were all made up and the countries were all made up. That might have been smarter. But I came out of it thinking, okay, I think we're all on the same page here. Being a religious devotee who is a literalist is going to lead to conflict. There's only suffering lying down the path of being willing to commit violence for an ideology. I think we're all on the same page there. They had the amps turned up to 11 on how Catholic the main character was.
Yeah, and that was surprising, because again, any of the actual revolutionaries, they would not have been practicing to that degree. I don't really know how much research has gone into this.
It may be that this is a kind of a caricature of what is generally known by people who've been unable to research extensively or unwilling to research extensively.
We ran out of steam there, but I think there are points we can pick up on at other times to explore in more depth. Thanks very much for listening. There are links to many of the acts and shows mentioned in the extended show notes, which are available to patrons via patreon.com/PEA Blair, where we gratefully receive funds of any amount to keep the podcast going and improve what we do. Ideally, we'd love loads of people to each give a small amount every month to cover costs for a hosting site that will make the podcast available on iTunes and Google Play and so on. It will also help us to keep attending cultural events to discuss and speak to more practitioners and scholars rather than just Andrew and me chatting at home. Please help the community grow by liking the Audiovisual Cultures page on Facebook, following at AV Cultures on Twitter, and emailing audiovisualcultures@gmail.com. I keep a list of ideas for future episodes, and requests are very welcome. We'll get to them when we can, and we encourage you to join us in discussing your chosen topic. Thanks again for all your support, and catch you next time.